In Act 5 of George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, the ideological battle between Henry Higgins and Eliza Doolittle reaches its zenith, dismantling Victorian notions of class, gender, and authorship. This act, often misread as mere romantic tension, is, in fact, a radical critique of social hierarchies and patriarchal control in the Edwardian era. In this academic analysis, we will dissect the act's structural complexity, thematic resonance, and Shaw's subversive use of literary devices. Let us examine how, through the presentation of a flower girl with a smart head on her shoulders undergoing a battle of intellects with a pompous privileged professor, Shaw transforms an ancient myth into a modernist manifesto for women's rights. Act 5 returns Eliza to Wimpole Street, not as Higgins' protégé, but as his ideological and intellectual adversary. Having fled after the triumph of the Ambassador's Ball, Eliza now confronts Higgins with a demand for acknowledgement, not of her phonetically improved speech, but of her humanity. Higgins, emblematic of Enlightenment rationality and scientific ways, reduces her to a squashed cabbage leaf experiment, while Colonel Pickering's paternalistic but outdated diplomacy fails to mediate. The act's climax, in a radical move for the theatre of the time, rejects conventional resolution. Eliza refuses Higgins' proposal of financial dependency, aligning instead with Freddie Eynsford Hill, whose naivete is established as a clear contrast to Higgins's tyrannical behavior. Shaw's deliberate ambiguity, Eliza's future unresolved, Higgins' hubris unchecked, subverts the Victorian Cinderella trope, foregrounding instead a proto-feminist assertion of autonomy, which very much echoed the political atmosphere of the time as the women's movement for suffrage and greater independence was just beginning to emerge. In Act 5, Shaw tackles for big ideas that clash, but connect. Finding your true self, Eliza isn't just learning new and impressive words. She's figuring out who she really is. When she snaps, "I sold flowers, I didn't sell myself," she's saying, "I'm not a product for Higgins to show off." Shaw, who hated unfair social systems, wants us to see Eliza's rebellion as a fight against being used. Higgins treats her like a project, but her position now in Act 5 is clear. She's done with being his puppet. Who controls language? In an age of British imperialism and domination over 1/3 of the world, Higgins clearly thinks the ability to speak proper English equals power. He uses his phonetic skills not just to teach Eliza, but to control her. What he had not considered, of course, is that Eliza turns the tables on him and becomes much smarter and far more developed as a human being than Higgins could ever be. Her sharp questions, "What am I fit for? Where am I to go?" aren't just anger, they're a clear expression of how she no longer feels connected to anything she was familiar with. She's using his tools to challenge his authority. She has learnt the rules of the game, but now she is beating the teacher at it. Fake it till you make it? Or break it? Eliza's Duchesque act is just that, an act. But when she throws Higgins' slippers at him, the pretending is over. What Shaw is saying and what he wants us to understand is that society forces women to play roles, to be nice, to be loyal, to be obedient, in short, ladylike. But what if they don't wish to be these things? Consequently, Eliza's defiance isn't just about slippers, it's about rejecting the role of the Duchess she's been given and pursuing the road to finding out who she really is. Who's the real boss? In the original Pygmalion myth, a sculptor, Pygmalion, carves a statue, Galatea, that comes to life and stays obedient. But in his play, Pygmalion, Shaw flips this. Eliza, the statue, outgrows her creator. Higgins thinks he's the genius artist, but in Act 5, we see that it is Eliza who has emerged as the stronger intellect of the two. She is clearly stating, "I'm my own person now, and you have no control over me anymore." Literary devices and dramatic techniques. Satire in Pygmalion. What is satire? Satire is a literary technique that uses humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to criticize people's flaws, societal norms, or institutions. Think of it as a mirror held up to society to show its absurdities, but with jokes. The goal is to make you laugh, but more importantly, to think. Often pushing for change by exposing hypocrisy or foolishness. How Shaw uses satire in Pygmalion. Mocking class snobbery. Example, Higgins treats Eliza like a project because she's poor, claiming he can turn her into a duchess just by changing her accent and the vocabulary she uses. Shaw is laughing at the idea that your worth depends on how you speak, not on who you truly are. Why does this constitute satire? It's absurd that Higgins, a rude, spoiled, pompous and messy professor, judges Eliza for her low-class speech while acting like a child himself. What Shaw is saying, but more importantly, asking people to think about is, rich people aren't superior, they're just better at faking it. Gender stereotypes. Example, Mrs. Higgins scolds her son for treating Eliza like a live doll, asking, what's to become of her when the experiment ends? Shaw mocks how men like Higgins see women as toys to play with, mere objects to shape into the way men want them to be, and not as real people, with brains, with feelings, with ambitions and hopes of their own. Why does this constitute satire? Eliza's fiery rebellion, for example, throwing Higgins' slippers at him, returning her duchess jewelry, turns the tables on Higgins. What Shaw is saying to his audience is, pay attention. Women aren't puppets. They are often smarter than men and they'll call you out on your nonsense. The myth of self-made success. Higgins, in his typically pompous way, takes all the credit for Eliza's transformation, bragging, I made that woman. But Eliza immediately fires back at him. I sold flowers, I didn't sell myself. Why does this constitute satire? Shaw highlights how the upper class pretends to help the poor but really just continues to use them. As we watch the events unfold, we can see that Eliza's success isn't thanks to Higgins, it's in spite of him. Superficiality versus substance. At the ball, we hear from Higgins and Pickering that everyone admires Eliza's perfect accent and delightful manners, but nobody ever cares about her thoughts or feelings. Why does this constitute satire? Shaw's laughing at how society cares more about appearances, like fancy clothes or proper speech, than actual humanity. Key takeaways. Shaw doesn't just write entertainment or jokes, he uses satire to attack unfair systems. Pygmalion isn't just a play about a girl learning improved vocabulary. It's about tearing down the silly rules that divide people. So, next time you think about Higgins' rant about vowels, remember, Shaw's roasting the idea that how you speak matters more than what you say. Summary of George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. Henry Higgins, a phonetics professor, bets he can transform Eliza Doolittle, a Cockney flower girl, into a refined lady, a duchess, by teaching her to speak properly. With Colonel Pickering's help, Eliza masters upper-class diction and manners, dazzling society at a grand ambassadorial ball. However, her success exposes deeper conflicts. Higgins treats her as an experiment, while Eliza demands respect and independence. The play ends ambiguously, with Eliza leaving Higgins to forge her own path. Major themes. Class and social mobility. Shaw critiques the idea that accent and manners define worth. Eliza's transformation reveals how society equates speech with class, yet she remains trapped between worlds, accepted by elites but stripped of her original identity. Identity and self-worth. Eliza's journey is not just about speech but self-discovery. She rebels against being Higgins' creation, asserting, I'm a human being, not a pair of boots. Language as power. Higgins uses language to control others, but Eliza weaponizes her eloquence to challenge him, showing that words can both oppress and liberate. Gender and agency. Shaw mocks patriarchal norms. Eliza rejects being Higgins' live doll, symbolizing women's fight for autonomy in a male-dominated society. Key ideas. The artificiality of class. Manners and accents are performances, not markers of moral or intellectual superiority. Critique of charity. Higgins's help is, in reality, no more than an act of pure selfishness. We see through the character of Eliza that true empowerment requires respect, not oppression or condescension. Human dignity. Eliza's demand for recognition, what's to become of me, underscores Shaw's socialist belief in every person's right to respect, value and self-determination. Literary techniques. Satire. Shaw ridicules class snobbery. For example, Eliza's flawless performance at the ball fools elites obsessed with superficial traits like money and position. Irony. Higgins, the language expert, fails to communicate empathy or even to understand the very basics of Eliza's humanity. Symbolism. Eliza's discarded jewelry and Higgins' slippers represent her shedding enforced and oppressive identities. Dialogue as conflict. Rapid-fire debates between Eliza and Higgins expose power struggles and ideological clashes, both at the individual level and in society at large. Why Pygmalion matters. Pygmalion dismantles myths of social hierarchy and gender roles. Shaw's witty, provocative style challenges audiences to question who holds real power: the creator or the individual who dares to take control and redefine themselves. The play's open ending, there is no romantic resolution, which is what audiences expect there to be. He emphasizes Eliza's triumph and Higgins's defeat as she walks away not as a flower girl, not as a duchess, and not as a refined lady who matches society's expectations of such, but as Eliza Doolittle, her own complete and independent person.